first time they're coming to a Singularity event? Alright, handful of you guys. So the rest of you, I'm gonna assume you are masters at this, so no questions allowed for you, just for newbies. Just kidding. Just first things first, for questions, we're not gonna pass the mic around because it's more like a fireside chat. So I'm gonna be checking this. You can go to sli.do, slido. Actually don't know how they market it, and you just put a code, future of work, and I'll be getting the questions from there. So please make sure if something you want to get it out, put it there, and I'll see it here while we're talking. Actually, while they're talking, I'm not looking at Facebook, looking at the questions. So from the last event that we had, we got feedback from some of you guys that you wanted to know more about what are all the underlying topics that we're talking about and why Singularity is what it is and what we're trying to do. So, show of hands, who knows who this guy is? Alright, so those of you who don't know, this is half of the formula that started Singularity University. His name is Peter Diamandis, and the framework I'm going to be teaching you guys today is called the 6 Ds. And this framework will help you guys understand sort of the stages through which all of these technologies go through that make it exponential. And if you haven't heard of this, don't worry, it'll click as I go, and I'll try to go as quickly as I can so we can get to the panel. So the first one is digitize. So whenever any technology goes from analog to digital, basically zeros and ones, two things happen. It allows for near zero cost replication and transmission. So this is actually the backbone of all of this, and it's the most important. Even though it's the first one, it's the most important. And these two factors, just think about it, they're going to start getting faster and faster. Good example of this is film photography. You had 24 pictures. You were taking care of each of one. You didn't know half of those were going to be blurry, and the other half had a finger in them. And maybe you got a good shot. Whereas nowadays, a lot of things, it creates abundance, right? You don't think about snapping a picture of your food, whereas I remember seeing people with a Kodak camera with film, like taking pictures of their lunch. It was a lot more precious than that. And this leads to the second one. So this picture right here, can anyone tell me something they see curious about it? It's 1904, New York City. It's actually 2 cars. All right, so this is 1904. So when you think about it, in 1912, the parity between horse and buggies and motor vehicles in New York City was reached. So 1904 to 1912, you had parity. And this is a picture of New York City in 1917. Can anyone see a horse and buggy there? All right, so this is so you guys think, this is history repeating itself, right? Human beings, we not only are fueled by technology, but once it hits, just gets faster and faster. What used to be something that was scarce and like the weirdos had it, the early adopters, that just everyone gets it and it moves on. And the reason why this is very important is because when you think about these technologies, there are a lot of things that you probably look at the gadget and you're like, that's a gimmick. But that gimmick, I mean, when Siri first came out and all those voice assistants, it was like, wait, 1 or 2 years, it's gonna look like. Can you click? I don't know why this isn't working. But not sponsored by Google, but since we're here already, one of the important things to take into account is that Waymo is one of the Google self-driving car project, and the important thing is that, once again, doubling patterns, and when we begin, this was tweeted by the founder around November last year, and if you see from 2000, it took them from 2009 to 2015, so basically 6 years to get to 1 million miles driven, and then you see almost like a doubling pattern. Last year they had 4 million. Now this is from July. They had 8 million. August, they passed 9 million. So the speed at which a technology, like this is a technology that requires more and more data, the more miles it has on the road, the faster we'll get there. And now one of the most cliche pictures every tech conference has. Everything this guy has on the table, you have here. And we'll come back to what that means for everyone in the world. But the fourth one is dematerializing. So basically, the technology makes, because it's digitized and it passed from deceptive to disruptive, now you don't really need the physical thing. You can emulate its functions. Same thing, 10 years ago, Satoshi Nakamoto with Bitcoin as something that seemed weird and yeah, sort of like buy pizza from across the world. And look where we're now with blockchain and cryptos. Now the next one is kind of weird because it's demonetizing. So getting somewhere to the point that it's inexpensive to use. So anyone in the room ever do research before the internet? All right. So how it was for those of you who are young like me, I had to Google this. But you had to go to a library, find a book if they had it, and then actually look through the book, and maybe it didn't even have what you need, right? And that's one thing I love about Google is it demonetized research. Now anyone around the world in whatever language, they can just look for it and then index the internet. This guy and the App Store, he didn't think about it, but what he was demonetizing was it made software able to do things on a device that everyone had. And remember how I told you that that picture of the guy with everything on the table is going to come back? So this is from Peter's book, Abundance. So you have about 900K worth of tech if you had been using it when it first came out on your phone. And this is, you have $200, $300 smartphones nowadays that have this. Just let that sink in. Almost $1 million worth of innovation in your pocket at all times, and pretty much everyone has it, and we complain about it. It's slow, it's buggy. Yeah, it's getting there. When it comes to life, demonetizing life, this is the Human Genome Project and the cost to sequence the genome. So we started at about, I think it was 100 million, and now we're at about a K per person. College education, things like Udacity, and my favorite of demonetizing YouTube. I recently read an article, I forgot the actual number, but it was something about like half of the people going to YouTube, they go to search for something that they've never done and they want to figure out how to do it. It's a new search engine, right? You want to, how to put a door frame, I don't know. And you figure it out, there's DIYers, but it's, once again, it's going at a pace that, how much does it cost you to upload a video, other than making the video? I think it's free, and the content is there. And the last one is democratizing. So if you see, the line starts to blur the more we advance. And the reason why is because it just keeps getting faster and faster. It has momentum. So Peter Diamandis, one of the things that he realized was that incentive competitions are one of the best ways to make changes that otherwise wouldn't happen. I mean, who doesn't like a prize? And he came up with the X Prize Foundation, right? But you're talking about prices that are hundreds of millions of dollars. You basically don't have access to even have a voice there as a regular Joe. So walking the talk, he came up with Hero X. You can put everything from I want to solve how to do homework, math homework for $100, all the way down to my business. I want to figure out how people can manage their finances better. I want to find a better savings book. And you just crowdsource from the world. You can even crowdfund the price, so if everyone has a problem with, like, I don't know, parallel parking, before self-driving takes over it, you can do it. He also has a conference that a lot of the content that I'm getting from comes from, and it's basically 360 executives. It's $15,000 a pop, and you need to buy it about 3 years in advance and commit for 5 years. So do the numbers, you still need to get into the club, it's not really expensive. And then 10x cheaper, $1,500 a year. He made a digital program, and you have access to live streaming. He's even live streaming on VR this year. And you have webinars with people like, someone's trying to call. And this is the importance, right? It's giving access to all these things that used to be just the top of the top had access to, and now once you have access, just think about, we have the rising billion, like Africa getting connected, and you're able to sell services to them. you're able to employ them. So think about that, right? As technology enables you to do that. So basically, this is the framework. I know I'm running probably low on time, so I'll try to rush through the next part. So this is the other half, Ray Kurzweil, Googler. He wrote a little book called Singularity is Near, and this is the thing he noticed was that we had a doubling power of price performance of $1,000 in a device, and long story short, by 2045, your iPhone or Pixel will have the computational capacity of all of humanity's brains together. So, yeah, so, yeah, I mean, existential crisis and everything, but the main idea is that faster and cheaper computing power just makes all of these technologies, which are just a few, I had to choose the ones that had most recent in my head, but what it's doing is that it's accelerating all of these, it's making all of them cheaper, and that's going to cause convergence, right? And the important part about it is that this convergence is what's actually going to disrupt everyone. So it's not just the blockchain startups doing their blockchain thing, but it's what if then we have blockchain alongside robotics, and robots are just doing contracts amongst themselves and on something that no human intervention happens, and you have full abundance and prosperity, and we get to a world where no one has to work out of sustenance, but just robots do it. What do we do then? That's part of the things that I want to talk about today. Positive note, this is from the Global Summit. So for those of you who are worried about technology taking jobs away, these are things that didn't exist or we didn't need a couple of years ago. So 15 years is not that long of a time, right? So this is at least one per year. And think about as technology keeps advancing, we couldn't have imagined that these were going to be needs. I'm going to rush through this one, but for those of you who did your homework, if not, I'll send it over again. There's a TED Talk, Kai-Fu Lee. His TED Talk basically is around how AI will save our humanity, and he maps out tasks that we do for a living, from everything from optimization-focused tasks to more creative and strategic. And this is the timeline he talks about, right? So those of you who are in more creative functions, you're quote-unquote safe for the next 15 years. Just bear in mind, that does not mean that you don't have to adapt and you'll be fine. That means that your job existentially will not get immediately replaced, but the way you work is going to change for sure. And if you add, so this is the thing that I love about Kai-Fu Lee, when you add the dimension of compassion to it, which is something that when you think about AlphaZero and when it beat Lee Sedol at Go, I don't know if any of you saw the stream after Lee Sedol was technically lost. He was in tears. I mean, when Go lost the game, I mean, it's just another iteration and simulation, right? It's just another failed attempt, and I'll just keep iterating. So that's one thing that if you blanket human compassion around it, then you get this framework, right? If you don't need compassion and it's highly optimizable, AI will do it better. If you do need compassion around it, you can have AI, think about like elderly care, you can have AI at the core telling people what to do with the actual medical treatment, but the person telling you the news, like, hey, you have X, here's to live, like the hard news, a human's always going to be better at delivering it. So you just envelop that cold AI, as he calls it, with human warmth. And then you have the other side, which is one of which you'll have augmented humans, just using AI as their assistant, like, hey, I don't know, whatever your favorite name, you can call it Fido, because your dog died and his son are going to name that AI assistant. You can probably download even your consciousness eventually, right? So you'll have this superhuman context, and just think about it, kids that grow up with robots and interacting with this kind of things. I don't know if you've seen a kid pick up an iPad and just start doing things that it seems like they were born with it. We are the ones who are going to have more trouble adapting to this new standard of life. But do I have time for giving them like exciting examples, or we should cut it? Right, I'll rush through it. Sorry, we can talk about it later, or meet sometime else. I can send you slides or something. So I'll just go quickly. So these are some exciting developments. All of these things are news from the last 3 to 5 months. I try to look for the most recent, so more of a wow factor. I thought I was going to have more time. So construction, putting drywall. Japan is a robot. This robot It's a newer iteration of it, but it can pick up drywall and place it on its own, autonomous. It can work beside humans or autonomously. And the reason why I'm excited about this is we're going to get humans away from dangerous jobs. X price has an avatar price. You're going to have a human if you want operating one of these, but this is just the autonomous version. Sorry, I'm going to have to cut it, but awesome company, Icon. I don't know if any of you know, but that's a 3D printed house in Austin, fully permitted, and they want to bring that technology to Mars and the moon. So good for everyone, right? Their development is right here in Austin. We're going to have an event with them next year, so keep your eyes peeled. If any of you have played golf, you think about the cart lady or cart guy, and gotta be inclusive. And there's a company in Iceland that's called Flightrex, and they offer drone delivery as a service. So they have 3 models. They're basically modified DJI Ghosts with a little bit of AI so that they can do autonomous flight. These are the prices. It's not that expensive. And yeah, I mean, they're basically building it as a platform so that you want to deliver something. They started with golf courses, mainly because a golf course doesn't have a lot of the problems that you have with buildings, people, and just overall safety. So you can have someone still cooks it, and we'll talk about it right now. Just want this video to play to the point where you see it taking off. Yay, flies on its own. No one has to fly it, and it delivers it to whatever hole you're in. So if you want to stall, it works. I just want to see you guys how it delivers. Yeah. Yay. I actually want to hear what PJ has to think about this. Probably future favor service here. Lions Golf Course coming soon next year. But this is the other side, right? So now thinking about companies, how we shape what technology will do. So this is a startup in San Francisco. It's called Creator. This machine you see here can fully cook a burger on its own. No human intervention necessary other than loading it up. It allows you to bring costs down to the milliliter of sauce, and you can have the same burger cost the same amount of money. They sold the burger for $6. If you ask me, it's because at the end of the video, which I do want you guys to see, that's the human part that, yeah, a person still gives it to you with a nice smile and a beer. So yeah. And then you have another startup that I love their approach to it, and these are robotics. They're thinking about, yes, we will have robots take over new kitchens, but what about all the kitchens we already have? And they're designing a robot that's assigned to work alongside humans in existing kitchens. Basically, it can learn from you and it works beside you. You're short on staff, someone's sick, you just bring the robot out and they can make sure that everything's done to perfection. Uses a combination of computer vision, AI, and just, yeah, a lot of other parts of AI. Robotics this is once again, remember, convergence, right? A robot on its own wouldn't be able to do all these things. Do I have any front-end developers in the room? No? Damn it, this joke was going to be so much better. So if you have any UX designers, you're used to just having your sketches and then you hand it over to the next person. But there's a company, they're sort of stealth mode. They're from Bulgaria, and they have real-time computer vision to production code. That's happening in real time. A friend of mine, and I was like, can I tell people about this? And he was like, my investors will kill me, so please don't. But I convinced him to. Yeah, I mean, eventually people are going to find out. But just think about what that means for you. Like, things that you would think like programming, like, yeah, coding, I'm fine. I'm like golden for the next 5 years, at least 10, 15. But the thing is, this is part of what I mean by, you're going to change the way you think about work, right? You're going to do the creative thinking. What content goes there? How am I going to deliver it? What is the experience I'm creating? And then AI will take care of delivering it. One last thing. I spoke with Peter Diamandis and the Abundance Digital team. It's $1,500 normally a year. To the Austin community, they're giving us $500 off. You can either do it there, that code, or there's a QR code or a shortened link. If you don't get it, just let me know. And there's something special for people who ask the best questions. So yeah, please ask questions for the panel. And that's it. So thank you. Sorry it took a bit longer than I thought, but. fire pit, but yeah, we're gonna have people instead. So sorry for the delay, but if I'm rushing, it's because I feel like I'm late. So I don't know where to sit. I think you're gonna sit there, right? But I want you guys to welcome our speakers. They're on both sides of the room, so whomever wants to come up. Come on.
Not all of us at the same time?
Everyone.
Oh, okay.
they're gonna introduce themselves. So there's 30-second intro. Who are you? Why do you care about this? And we'll get rolling after that. So you're first.
Ooh, lucky me. Hey everyone. I am Steve Meyer, and I am a co-founder for an AI services startup, Kung Fu AI. So we are services. So think of us as a consultancy that also builds things. We're strategists that make things. We are a bunch of former serial entrepreneurs, mostly product guys who built ML technologies into a product, former CIOs, and a bunch of deep learning guys who thought services is the play right now and products no more fun. So now we're traditionally working with companies of all sizes. And think of us as a startup that helps companies start up and accelerate their AI programs. So that's me. Look forward to it.
My name is Steven Huerta. I'm the CEO and founder of a startup called Walkify. We're based here in Austin. We are an employee feedback and engagement measurement platform built for modern workforce. So I can explain what exactly that means later if any of you are interested, but I'm excited about this session because it's what we do. Like, we literally measure how the workforce is changing, what impacts that has to our clients, and so I'm excited about talking about some of the trends that we're going to be digging into tonight.
Thanks. My name is PJ Tanzillo. I'm a head of product at a company here in Austin called Favor Delivery. We are an on-demand delivery service. Basically, if you as a consumer want anything brought to you that can be bought with a credit card, we'll go pick it up for you. Most of the time it's tacos. And the reason I'm excited about this is, one, to hear what you guys have to say, because you're going to solve a bunch of my problems, which is amazing. But we are, we're a jobs platform. I mean, that's basically what we do. We are a way for people, we're changing the way people make money. And it just so happens the best way to do that is to offer on-demand delivery right now. But our goal is to be the best way to make money, the most flexible job, the most fun way to either, whether it's your side hustle or whether it's your full-time job, you can earn a living wage and beyond on your terms in a way that doesn't give you a boss. You download an app, you want to work, you make some money. It's kind of a cool vision. And so that's what we're in this for.
Great, thank you. So once again, it's just an open conversation. So trying to put you guys on the spot, like just freely talk. So the first thing that when I was preparing for this event, the first thing I thought of was, okay, all these technologies are coming. So what do you guys think the workplace is going to look like? I mean, I don't think offices, cubicles, and like clocking in, clocking out is going to be around for long. So maybe Steve.
Yeah, well, PJ could probably speak to this more than we can. I can tell you a little bit about what we see in the data from our clients. And we work, just so you guys, to put context, our smallest, we work with about 80 clients, companies. The smallest is about 100 employees. The largest is 10,000 employees. So mind you, that's kind of the frame of the data that we look at. But what I can tell you is that companies are not ready for the changes. They're absolutely not ready. And the reality is the way that companies operate in terms of the way they look at their people, or I guess, there was a Deloitte paper you sent out, human capital, if you want to call it, is very antiquated. The changes in the demographics, the workforce is more diverse. And that doesn't only mean from kind of the traditional dimensions. It's obviously a very young workforce, but it's also a very old workforce. So I think the quote was 70 is the new 50, in the workforce, and that is just kind of compounding the issues. Companies are, business is moving fast, and companies can't keep up with demands of the change the things that their employees are demanding, whether it's feedback, whether it's wellness, whether it's working from home, and the reality is like Google represents like the 99th percentile in terms of companies that are progressive. The vast majority of the world in businesses, aren't anywhere near where some of the high-tech firms are, and so we see, some interesting days ahead. What those days look like in terms of the makeup of jobs, that is probably I'll leave to my panelists here to talk about. But I can tell you that there is a demand. There are changes that are now being demanded, and I think that's obviously been reflected in the news lately. Especially, that probably hits close to home here, and so change is coming. But companies are lagging behind the makeup of the workforce, and so we're excited. Obviously this is good for us because we can help point out where the really hot topics are and where the real pain points are in terms of employees and their feedback.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I'm most equipped to speak about this from the company trying to build something as opposed to the platform for jobs. I think we're progressive in the way that we allow our runners to do work, but feels like the Stone Age in the way that we do work ourselves. I've said this to our leadership team, but we're right now still limited in our talent that we can bring on board to the people who are willing to drive to this particular point of the plan and be there every day. And it's not because we don't want to broaden. It's just because the way we do work is fundamentally broken for anyone who's not sitting nearby. So many conversations lead to decisions. So many decisions lead to actions. All that happens like Slack is the closest equivalent. And one of my coworkers the other day just told me Slack is when I talk about Slack, it's the only time I seem like an old man. But it is like a nightmare of information for me. It's like a disorganized chaos of important things mixed in with not important things, mixed in with noise, mixed in with urgent, mixed in with email or whatever, or bots, and it's just the worst. It makes me feel like an old person dealing. It's like when I use Snapchat is the only other time I feel like an old person. But we haven't figured out a way to distribute that feeling of sitting around a table and solving a problem together. And it's just faster and it's just easier. And we haven't yet gotten to the place where we have to innovate, so we're lagging. I feel like I'm like a caveman in that way. But hearing you talk about this stuff was like, oh man, the train's coming and it's gonna hit us.
I can say from an AI or a machine learning perspective, where our thoughts are more around organizational structures. How are organizations going to be reconfigured to adapt to things like data and data capabilities? That's all AI is. It's a data capability. And how is that going to change how people operate underneath an organization? And I think the biggest changes aren't really scary changes. It's just the same way when the internet came in the early 90s, we started seeing things like CIO and IT pop up. Not a scary thing, it just becomes the new normal, and we had access to information faster, businesses became more agile, and we invented new businesses altogether. So AI is going to do something very, very similar, where you're going to start to see a bunch of silos. We have business over here, right? And if you're lucky, you have data over here, right? And then there's IT over here. You're going to start to see those silos break down, and they're going to consolidate under a new silo where you're going to have agile teams where the MBA is working with the data scientist, is working with the product manager, and you're going to see new roles and processes altogether, like human in the loop and continuous data acquisition, progression of AI technology, where it's a software that continuously gets better with more data being collected. So all these things are new, and it's going to require people to work together a little bit differently, but it has to very much keep in account the corporate strategy all the way down to the technology execution, and those people are going to have to work together in a very agile fashion. So less hierarchies, more people coming closer together, and new roles and processes entirely. So generally speaking, we're fairly optimistic from a job standpoint. Those are mostly good things than scary things.
Great. I love the perspective. I mean, one of the things that comes to mind right now is the weakest link is, in this case, the human being, right? So a lot of these things rely on humans inputting data, or humans actually writing on Slack what they think, or anonymous surveys, or just doing your job and teaching the AI. What do you guys think is going to happen as your new coworker for your team is an AI that you're working with, and that's your assistant or that's your boss? The more Twilight Zone-ish version of it.
Should I go first?
Yeah.
AI guy. Okay, you guys. That's me. Okay. So again, I think we are. Let's start with the basics, right? There is let's bifurcate AI and IA. Now, everyone's heard of artificial intelligence. No one really knows what it means, but we all have heard of it, right? And then there's this thing called intelligent augmentation, or augmented intelligence, if you like to confuse your AIs. It's totally your call. And what's going to happen sooner is this idea of intelligent augmentation. AI is going to make us better, faster, stronger, more efficient, where what will never be replaced, at least not in the next 40, 50 years, and beyond that we can't really even see, is judgment and creativity. So we saw a little bit of that, right? AI is starting to create some things. You want to challenge me on GANs and creating art and things like that? Let's have that conversation later. But what's going to happen is that we're going to see a pairing of man and machine that's going to be greater than any one man or any one machine. It's going to augment us in really fun and exciting ways to allow us to automate some of the 1 to 5 second tasks and sequences of tasks that bog our day down, and we get back to the things that humans like to do. Think, come up with things, right? Being able to be strategists and directors. So from a creativity standpoint, though your startup's a little scary, so that was a curveball, but generally pretty safe. And then the other thing is the AI's relationship from an intelligent augmentation standpoint is it could be a little assistant. Siri is an example of an intelligent augmentation. How can we move some of those 3 to 5 second tasks and put it into a virtual agent that we work with as a peer? Now, there are certain scenarios where AI becomes our manager, meaning that, let me give you an example, compliance automation, right? We are filling out a form, and the AI scores us on its completeness, and if we did a good job, and gives us feedback if we missed something. That's an example of AI being the manager. Not really a scary thing. It's probably something we all could use right now. And then below that is AI. We're the manager of the AI. And there's countless examples of that, but commonly human in the loop. Best example, airplane pilots. Right? We've had autonomous vehicles, flying ones, forever. And the pilot is only a human in the loop. That thing flies itself. So the pilot is really the manager, making sure the airplane is doing a good job. So those are the types of relationships we're going to see for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And then beyond that, who knows? But rest assured, it makes things better for the most part.
So I personally, I think it's rad. I can't wait to interact with an AI colleague. My background is in HR, and so we track 12 indicators of engagement, and the two right now today, the most commonly low-scoring areas are collaboration and management, and that's probably that probably makes sense to you guys. The indicator, the dimension of engagement that I think could be most positively impacted by an AI like colleague or manager is management. And we see that there is a huge managerial problem in the country, because our clients are everywhere. And the reality is, companies have failed at developing strong managers, and leadership have done a poor job of creating succession plans and pulling people up. And so what HR, typically does. HR typically functions in a compliance, it's like a compliance type of role, and that's changing over time to a more strategic type of role, and that excites me. The problem is the compliance aspect of the job keeps sucking, keeps pulling HR back. When managers and employees, there's a human element, the judgment piece, that when left unchecked can create really negative consequences. And the ideal is management should be able to handle these things. The reality is they're not always prepared to do so, or there are pockets of management that fail. And so HR is there to help monitor, to help bring better structure, and bring a creative voice for employees to provide feedback when things are going wrong. But HR doesn't scale very well, and I think where AI can really be powerful is to help guide managers and help flag to managers when they're kind of veering, reinforcing when they're going down the right path and helping managers focus on the right things to do, but also highlighting and potentially even curating the feedback to HR or the executives when things are veering down the wrong path. And so from my world, I think the future of having AI colleagues is really exciting. And really has a potential to transform at least what we do.
I feel like I have like a third of a formed thought, but I'm going to go with it. We'll see where this goes. So I don't know if any of you have ever read anything Brene Brown has written or seen her TED Talks and stuff. She's amazing. And part of the thing that she says that leads to like human fulfillment and happiness at work isn't necessarily the getting the work done, but it's the human connection that you make with other people. And it's weird because this comes to mind so I work for Favor. We're a delivery company. Amazon is the world's best delivery company. Right? They get stuff to you from anywhere really fast. And if I want to order like anything, I order it from Amazon. Except when I want like a taco and I order a but the way that we've been able to compete with companies like that, like logistical masterpieces and operational masterpieces, is by encouraging our people to create a human connection with the person they're delivering for. And I don't know if you guys have delivered Favor, and it's not commercial, I promise, I'm not that kind of guy. But what happens is you get a text from a person, and the person's like, hey, I'm on your side. I'm here to help you. If you need anything, utensils, allergies, whatever, just let me know. And it's more like going to a restaurant and having a great waiter or waitress. It's kind of about the food, but it's also about the experience. And what Brene Brown always says is that she studied happy people and unhappy people, and the thing that distinguishes the happy from the unhappy is that they are able to drive and establish human connection. And so AI in the power assist mode is what we call it at Favor, and I don't know why, but in the augmented intelligence mode, feels like it's amazing because it can make you better and stronger and faster and still put you in the forefront in order to make those connections with people. Where it gets scary to me, and this maybe is the old man in me talking, but when you're I think that's why people freaked out when Google made a reservation at a restaurant, right? There wasn't, have you guys seen this where like there was like a demo of Google Voice, it was Google Assistant, and it like called a restaurant and made a reservation on behalf of a person, and it fooled the person on the other end of the phone, or at least it pretended to. But I think it did. And all it did to fool them was like it was natural, and it inserted ums and hesitation in a way that a human would, and so the person on the other end of the phone thought that they were speaking to a human, and the world lost their mind about like whether that was moral or good, or whether the assistant needs to announce that it's his assistant. And I think it was basically because it was creating a false connection. It was like one person on one end of the phone thought there was a connection between a person and a person, and the robot was on the other end of the phone just like, ha ha ha, right? And that was what I think broke it. Like, if it would have just been like, hey, I'm Google Assistant, calling on behalf of PJ, right? Then I think everything would have been cool, even with the ums. It makes people comfortable. But that's what I think is like going to be so interesting to watch as AI comes into the workforce, is how we do the work in a way that makes us fulfilled. Because it's not all about what you get done; it's about how you feel at the end of the day, right? And that to me is like the big challenge of incorporating those together so that people don't feel threatened, but they also feel like they've got other people there.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, in my opinion, when I saw that, I feel like the biggest part of the uncanny valley experience was because there was a human on the other end. Think about it, if there were just two bots talking to one another, two AIs, like, what would be the problem?
Just humming at each other.
Yeah, I mean, we were like, yo, my human wants to like get their haircut. Great, my humans are available at this time. Right? No, think about it that way, right? I mean, things like being a secretary, seeing the secretary job as just the tasks of like picking up the phone, managing your schedule. These are the kind of things that, I mean, humans are not that great at. But for example, your secretary knowing that, oh, you have a conference later, so I'll get your suit pressed, and I know this is a place that can get it done today, or you spilled coffee, so I know what size you wear, what kind of shirt you like, what tie would be better. There are things that humans are way better at. If we see our work as just a list of tasks, yeah, be scared. If you see your job as just a list of tasks, and I love, that's a great segue for the next question. So recently, Peter Diamandis was talking with Tony Robbins about, okay, now today, most people, when they introduce themselves to one another in a party, they say, oh, I am such and such, and I do this. So we define ourselves a lot of times based on what we do for a living, not even like, hey, I'm a father of two, or this and that. We define ourselves based on our job. So what happens in a world where, fast forward, and you don't have to work for subsistence, but you do the creative stuff, what gives you purpose? How do you deal with that transition, that point where, hey, I am on that spectrum of optimization-focused tasks, repetitive, and here comes Sally, the new AI that will do my job. And what do I do, right? What do I do also as a company? I know that there are people that are coming here. I'm not going to say like, no, we're not going to use that tool because, yeah, we have a responsibility to our employees, but what happens then? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, no, I'll roll with it. So I think, I mean, you're bringing up a lot of things for me. I think that the way that we need to educate the way I was brought up, and I'm Mexican American, grew up in Dallas. My dad was the youngest of 12, first went to college, I went to UT. He raised me to hook up, yeah. Basically, I was raised, and the options that I was given were you're going to go to college, and you're going to be a doctor, or you're going to be a lawyer, or there were these very kind of traditional Latino things that I was kind of pre-programmed to want to be. And I ended up not doing that. I ended up becoming a consultant, and then I went to investment banking, and then I took the plunge to become an entrepreneur. And my mom thought that I was crazy. She's like, how can you work for a firm like Goldman Sachs and be a managing director and just leave? Like, you can't do that. And so part of what I think is going to change, like you showed the slide earlier, there are 15 jobs that didn't, or a page full of jobs that didn't exist 15 years ago, and I think that's going to accelerate. Obviously, the changes in the world are going to drive humans to have to do different things. And I think that the way that kids are raised also that pace needs to accelerate, the options that are given to kids. And my daughters are 6 and 8, and the things that they have access to, like the disciplines that they can enroll in now, it's just crazy. Like that didn't exist when I was a kid. And so I think that's going to continue, and I think it's going to accelerate. The reality is the tension in the workplace that I think is going to exist is how do you figure out, so my job is now going to be obsolete, and that is going to happen real fast, right? Boom, my job's gone. How do I pivot, and how do I, on my own time, figure out what is the new thing for me? And I think that companies are going to, if they're going to maximize their investment in people, are going to need to find ways of also, like we need to educate kids, we're going to need to educate the current workforce to pivot in these new ways. And the tension that we see in our data is that younger employees are very curious. and they want to do different things, and they want to leave work early to go take photography classes. And the older generation, like me, and even older, are suspicious of that. It's like, what do you mean you're going to leave at 5 and go take photography classes and do these things that make you really happy and purpose?
Yeah. Like,
you
what's
need
wrong
to
with
work.
you?
Yeah. And so that's the tension in the workplace we see is, and we see companies, really knowing that they need to change, but again, not knowing how to change. And the reality is, I think the winners in this war for talent, because those of us here, we're valuable commodities. We have assets that deliver business value to the companies we work for, and the companies that are going to win are going to be the ones that can educate and help you pivot in these different directions. So I don't know if that was coherent, but that's what came out of me.
I often wonder about lift operators. Where did they go, right? We have elevators now. We don't need someone to actually press the button and take us to a floor or pull the pulley, right? But there's countless examples of this. Well, I have no idea where they went, but this happens all the time, and the classic example is agriculture, right? Many of you may know this example. 1900, #1 industry, agriculture. Does anyone know the percentage of population that was in the agriculture industry?
70-80%.
It was closer to 40, but that's a ridiculous amount of people, right? In 1999, 2%. By 1999, where did all those people go? But what's interesting about that, and what's interesting about that slide, when you saw 15 or just dozens of new, I'm sure there's more than that. You didn't find
No,
out.
I mean, but the point of that slide was more the sort of the idea of we don't know what jobs will be invented. Like
Right.
as tech progresses, like the need comes in from that.
I'm gonna just play the consummate optimist of the group, but what's really exciting about this and interesting about this is there's this kind of sociological principle called the never enough principle, that no matter how much we move forward and put ourselves out of work, we invent up new things to do. We solve one problem and we're on to the next problem to solve. We invent new things, and that's really the role of humans, is to continuously create an event, and that's not going to go anywhere. So, even though tractors come in, what happens in 1940, give or take, is that states start to mandate kids stay in school until they're 16. High schools proliferate. And then they go to 18. And now colleges are going mainstream. We're going to colleges and we're learning new things and taking on new industries. And it's amazing how you can even today get a college degree or the equivalent of without ever going to college. We are inundated with information. So when we're sitting around, we don't have a job to do, we're probably on the internet and we're learning things and we're inventing things. We come up with something new to do. So I see that continuously happening, and I can't say what that next thing is going to be that we're just going to move on to, but whether it be a tractor or the printing press or a mechanized assembly line, the internet, mobility, all these things have been disrupted and displaced jobs. People upskill and reskill and move on to the new thing. I think the biggest concern that we all should be thinking about and trying to do our part really is thinking about wealth and access. Not everyone has the wealth or the access to the information to reskill, upskill themselves, to take on new things. So as AI goes mainstream, you're going to see a tremendous amount of wealth on one side and a tremendous amount of poverty on the other side. And we have to think about what we do with that. And that's more of the concern about AI than just putting us out of work and then we have nothing to do and starve.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that, and I'm going to take one of the questions from the audience, and I'm going to turn it around into what I think is a deeper question. So they were talking about the bias we bring into the AI algorithms, right? If it is something that statistically, yes, certain group of people have this, or this has been a factor of success. Maybe think about like recruiting. Think Ivy League, we have these sort of like, oh, because we tend to hire from this university or from these degrees, or because you have these keywords, right? You even have an AI like build the resume for you. Like, you want to get the job? Here, this is you can break it, right? So what do you guys think about the bias we bring into these tools and these technologies that we're building? What happens when the AI is making a decision without a human in the middle, right? Or should that be a reason for, okay, in these kind of situations, we should have human supervision?
I mean, I think this isn't a new problem to AI. I mean, selection bias is true in any test that you do, unless any sampling has some level of selection bias. And when you're evaluating that, you need to just understand, like you need to recognize the bias and understand the risk that brings. And then every person who's coming to analyze the same, like you go joking and you say, you can torture the data to say whatever you want it to say. You can analyze data with a bias and get it to do what you want it to do. And so, so I don't think that this is something that like, the difference between AI is AI hasn't yet figured out how to guard against that bias, but if it's truly learning, it's going to figure it out. I mean, we did, you know. That's my position on it. Is like you're never going to even like I do a lot of design reviews, right, at work, and so we're looking at like, hey, what is this design? And I have like an opinion, and you have to like get in the shoes of another user and then try on their bias and then look at it. That's like my technique. I'm never able to like remove everything, so I'm just like, oh, I'm going to do this bias. Okay, now I'm going to choose this other bias, and then that's how you can kind of see the whole picture. And so I think that's probably how things end up working out.
Yeah, that's tough. In a lot of ways, when we're developing these things, and it's a human process to, by and large right now, create the data. It's coming from us. It's a human process to build the model that ingests the data, and the output is human, often. Not surprising that Tay came out a hateful neo-Nazi, right? Because unfortunately, the volume of tweets is, hateful propaganda. And not to say that everyone on there is doing that, but there's a high volume of that, so why wouldn't a bot learn to do that? So AI isn't going to fix our biases. It's holding up a mirror, and we are inherently still a biased society, as sad as that is. And we have to fix us first, because the AI is just going to be a reflection of us. So we have to make conscious decisions to not do that, not be biased, be more inclusive. And in turn, what we create will be more inclusive. But really, the buck stops with us first. There are probably really cool technology solutions, and if you want to do some good in the world, create an algorithm that can sniff out bias and give recommendations on how to eliminate bias in a data set, my God, I'll hug you. That'd be amazing. But we have to work on ourselves first, and until we become a better society, we're not going to make better AI that's just purely a reflection of who we are.
Yeah. In the world of employee feedback, the reality is that tech stacks aren't prepared to support. AI is not prepared to support employee feedback in a way that will give employees or management confidence in the results, particularly employees. And we had to draw a line in the sand, like who. We are a feedback platform. We rely on employees trusting Workify, giving us feedback, being candid, feeling like that we provide a safe channel, and we also, but it's the company's management that's actually purchasing our software. Like they buy Workify and they pay our bills, right? And so we early on, our engineers, were like, hey, we need to side with the employee, and that's really, really, really important. And as a CEO, it was a no-brainer. Like, yes, absolutely, we can't exist if we don't do that. And so we experiment with a lot of different technologies, and we've tried a lot of different solutions, and the results don't give us confidence that a pure AI solution is the way to go. And so we are a tech-enabled service, and we know as a company that limits, which VCs and what investors will partner with us. and we're okay with that. We see, in the short to midterm, in the slide that you showed earlier, it's the human plus AI, and that's where our space is going, and really using AI to point humans to making better decisions, managers making better decisions, HR making better decisions, but there's, it's still, there's still work to do. When you talk about anonymous feedback, just that topic alone, anonymous feedback, we have CEOs that come to us and they're like, I don't understand why it has to be anonymous. They, an employee should just, man up and tell us what they feel. Like those words, actually, that's a quote. And that's just with anonymous feedback, right? That's not, factoring in AI and bad actors and what happens in all these different situations. And so there's work to do, but I definitely, I think the technology will catch up, and I agree with my panelists that it's just a matter of time before, that we find solutions to the problem. But in the short to midterm, I think at least in the world of employee engagement and employee feedback, it's going to be at best human plus AI.
I love what you're talking about, because two things that I want to rescue from there is, first of all, like humans being problem solvers, and I love what you said, PJ, of like we first need to work on ourselves. We figure it out. Like if you feel like you have a bias, like okay, I'm aware of this and I'll try to work around it. And when you think about it, the part about agriculture that we were talking about, why is Japan working so much on robotics, right? This brings a topic about longevity, right? As we keep improving all these technologies that will make our lifespan longer, you're going to have super aged populations. Japan is the primary example, and they have all the young people don't want to work in the fields. I mean, how many of you know someone who's like, yeah, I want to work in agriculture? It's just not cool anymore, right? So Japan has an aging population that need exoskeletons, that need a robot assistant that will help them tend to the fields. And once again, it's coming as a solution to that problem that they have. That for us here, it doesn't sound that like, oh yeah, I need someone to tend to the farm, but there's plenty of people still that want to do it. And this brings me to the next question that we're talking about here. So Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis, they mentioned a company, I know the name, but I can't say it publicly. They work in a company where, for example, people like Tony Robbins, that he has a lot of recordings on everything he does. They're basically creating a persona, like a replica of Tony, that you need to get pumped up before a meeting. You just have a call, or you can have a chat, and literally has all the nuances that Tony has, right? He's dematerializing and democratizing himself. Instead of charging you $150,000 a year, he can charge you $15 a month. And you'll have access to the AI. So they're talking about here, how is AI helping us be better leaders, right? One of the things that I rescued when I was doing this research was all the things that we used to call soft skills are the ones that are more on the compassion side, right? All the hard skills are the automatable. Financial analysis, right? But that's not the same as like, do I believe in this person? So what do you guys think about like, how can AI help us become better leaders and be better humans? That's how I would put it.
I'm going to take your hat away because I'm the best possible human I will ever be. No, it's funny because as you were talking about that, it made me think about, like, I don't even need machine learning to map out my like management style or like wisdom. It's like these 30 stories that I tell everybody when they hit these certain like milestones or problems in their career. I did one today. I was doing a one-on-one with an employee and I told him my story, and I hit the table at the same time I usually hit the table, and I did all the things that I normally do. And it was effective. It works. Like, you try on this thing, it works. It's like, okay, this is like, I'm going to put that in my tool belt. But I don't have like thousands of them as a leader. I have a few. And so I think that AI would make me more effective if it got me out of my pattern of of the 30 things that I know how to do and gave me like 3 million. If I had Tony Robbins in my pocket, it's like, you know what you need? You need Tony Robbins. You know what? Let's try on Tony Danza. Tony Danza would be a good one, right? Yeah, just any Tony. Pick your Tony. But that would be, that, I think that it would be, because you're limited by your experience, right? I'm personally limited by only the things that I've seen with my own eyes or that I've heard from people that I trust. And if I see it work, I'm stubborn in this way, then I believe it. And if I haven't seen it work, then I'm still a little skeptical. And it would be really cool if you could just like try on some other people's experiences and use that to augment your, like this is more like the power system, right? Which would be amazing.
Yeah, for me, I think AI, I believe that, when fully harnessed, AI will make me a better leader and a better human by helping me identify when I'm falling into like traps or like heading down negative pathways. One thing about, I go through leadership training and all these developmental things. It's, something that, I spend a lot of time doing. I'm passionate about just being a better person. And what I've learned is a lot of the wiring in my brain results in me doing some certain negative things or unproductive things over and over and over. And so I would hope that AI would help me, be a better person and a better leader by helping me be more aware of when I'm going down that path. The thing that I wonder is, for me in being connected with humans, and PJ said this earlier, like, being a better person and being a better human, for me also means being more connected. And in the realm, I'm not, a technology, leader by trade. I'm a people person. And so one concern I have is in, being, if being connected will bring me happiness and joy, how do I, in this new world that is still hard for me to imagine, do I lose that? Do I lose connectivity with people? Or is there a way for me to be more connected with people? And I don't know what the answer is to that. I think that's one question I have, and I think with that I'll hand to my panelists here. Who probably has a good answer.
So a hope and a thought. I hope that Tony's working on a Richard Simmons exercise bot, because that was just awesome. A thought is to answer really. Your thought is, how does it help me be, a better human? Or what's really interesting about that is there's a lot of really cool use cases using things like natural language processing and sentiment analysis using robots to make us more empathetic. Is that crazy? Right? How can a robot or a machine make us more empathetic? But there's actually some really cool examples. One is, think of a chatbot used for the call center agent to coach the call center agent how to better handle an angry customer, right? Using combination of natural language processing and sentiment analysis, instead of trying to replicate the human, it's coaching the call center person how to like, hey, ease the tone a little bit, you're coming off aggressive, try using this type of language to diffuse the situation, really help us be better communicators and better humans. Another really cool example is a company that I'm a fan of is Crystal AI. And Crystal is like Myers-Briggs on steroids, right? You can use Crystal to coach you on communication, and it'll analyze using your social media data how you communicate, how the person you're trying to communicate with, whether it be a colleague or a client, and use Myers-Briggs, that same thinking, and how to see them where they're at, and see you where you're at, and then bridge communication gaps. It'll do everything from give you templates on how to ask for a raise from your boss, using your communication style and their communication style, and trying to come up with this kind of empathetic middle ground. So sky's the limit with stuff like that, but using things like sentiment analysis for some of us that maybe aren't scoring high in the EQ or the empathy quotient can really help us connect with people in ways that maybe we're not so good at today. And then with explainability, you start getting coaching. Why do I want to approach it this way? Oh, I should be mindful of these types of words come off a little direct to this type of individual. It's actually really illuminating. I think it's beneficial to everyone. So just narrow use cases, of course, but ways that from a leadership perspective, it can help us be a little bit more empathetic and human.
Yeah, I love it, because one of the things I was thinking about is one of the greatest companies you haven't heard of yet. In the Global Summit for Singularity, I met this person that she's a psychologist, and she's working on a little stuffed elephant that it has a lot of microphones, and when you're talking with your partner, you just put it out, so like the elephant in the room, and it can actually score your empathy, right? Were you talking over one another? Were you talking louder? And actually give you feedback on like, hey, I mean, you can leave it open all the time. She was packaging it with like a soundproof box so that it only heard what you wanted it to like score you on. But one of the insights she was talking about was everything from how we talk to our kids, right? How we talk to one another, how even just, I mean, her vision, she was wearing a little lapel mic. That the only thing she was recording was how loud she was speaking. Right? That was the only thing she was scoring herself on, and trying to keep more. She had problems being really aggressive or being perceived really aggressive, so she was working on that, and how bridging onto as the computational power gets cheaper, we're going to have sensors everywhere. So whatever you want to track, did you get in a heated argument and your heart rate went up, and you're about to go into a difficult conversation or a meeting, and your heart rate is high, so maybe it'll recommend not Tony, but it'll, I don't know, put something from a Dalai Lama or something like chill, right? But what happens when you have unlimited access to information, right? What do you do as a company when you have employees that you could be giving them these tools? Or is that something that you guys believe that it's more up to you as a human being and what do I want to improve on, right? Is there any responsibility as an entrepreneur or as an employee? Where does the proactive responsibility lie on, in your opinion?
So repeat the question just so I make sure I don't.
So, I mean, you can take it wherever you want, but the main idea is like, with all these sensors getting cheaper, and I mean, there's a lot of parts around privacy, ethics, but what happens if we could be tracking all of these things, and should we go as a company, hey, I think you should work on this, or should it just be an allowance like remote workers that they give them, you have this much to do your setup?
So yeah, I think that companies, I think it would be a huge asset for something like that. Obviously, there are a lot of like employee relations issues and like HIPAA things, and there's a lot of like risks tracking, data like that. But assuming that you could do it, it could be controlled and done the right way. So one of the things that we find is when we set out to do what we do, we thought that companies would want data and information, like just help us pinpoint the issue, and we got it. We'll solve it. And what we've realized over time is our clients want solutions. Like some of them can actually already pinpoint it. They want an external party to help validate it, but they're like, tell us what to do. Like, we found this issue, we know we need to do better. Sometimes it's a specific person, sometimes it's a thing, sometimes it's managers, and so this notion that companies are spending millions, tens of millions, lots of money on training programs that don't work. And so if there is a more effective way of, as an employee, getting kind of like this real-time feedback, or getting, coached or directed, down the right learning pathway, it certainly would be, in my mind, a more effective way for companies to deploy resources that, like, in everyday decision-making, critical business decisions that need to be made. I think that would be much better than sitting in a classroom once a quarter being taught information that you can't remember or that you never practice. And so I think in the world of learning and development is a huge potential for this type of example to disrupt.
I think, generally speaking, more information doesn't necessarily always mean better, right? More data doesn't mean better. More noise isn't better. More signal is better. We want to find what's important within the data, and I think moving forward, we're going to have this information overload issue that we're going to have to solve, and the solve today is curation. Right? How do we curate information? How do we curate content? What's the dark side of that? Curating information to influence how you may vote in an election, right? Or misinformation. So I think there's going to be a tremendous challenge trying to not only curate content, that has to happen, but curate content ethically and do it in a way that really speaks to you or you or you. Because moving forward, we're not going to want the internet, you're going to want my internet. And today, my internet kind of looks like Flipboard, right? Or Apple News, where you're only getting the news that you've elected to see. And once upon a time, we just used the internet for news, and we would browse all these web pages, and the internet wouldn't tell us that this is happening, but we would have to go find it. And now we're starting to see things like Flipboard and Apple News curate that information and give it to us. Social media is attempting to do the same thing. So I think we need more of that. We need more people in that game to curate the access to information, but we have to do it in a very careful way, not to bias us with said information. And then there's the responsibility on us to not just trust what you'll be given, but go out there and seek more information and try to get perspective that maybe you didn't even account for. So it's a blessing and a curse, but it's a real problem right now, I think.
You want to go to another question?
Yeah, so we are around, we have about 25 minutes left. So I have a bunch of questions here, but I don't know if you guys prefer that we keep going through these ones or more open mic, someone wants to come and ask a question. Raise your hands. Keep going with this, or you want to ask a question?
Questions.
We could go back and forth.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting that you brought up the curation issue. I was actually frantically typing questions to go there. This works too. So my work and I were working on the startup called Operation Town Hall, and it's essentially trying to bring civility back into civil politics. But one of the issues that we keep running into from a user experience standpoint is who are we going after? Like, are we going after the people that are already open to having discussions with people that on the other end of the political spectrum? Or are we going after the people that actually need it and are so in their bubble that they're not, they don't have the blessing of being able to, discuss and see other views. So it's kind of like a catch-22, and I was just wondering, since it was already organically kind of coming up, if you guys have thought about it, just some talking points. Thanks.
Yes,
Yeah, go for it.
I've actually asked myself the same question. I've had aspirations to go into politics someday, and I think that it's a timely time. I don't know I'm sure there's a spectrum of political views here in this room. But one of the things that was inspiring about Beto O'Rourke's run recently was that he was trying. You see people try to divide, you see people try to unite, and you want to be on the side of uniting people, right? But it keeps failing, right? It does. It just keeps failing. And so you're like, well, maybe that's not what people want, but you want them to want it. And so it's inspiring that you guys are trying to change that. But how do you get to people who do? How do you get a message to people who don't want to hear it, who aren't even open to it? I don't think that's an AI question. That's a fundamental human. How do you open someone's mind whose mind is not yet open to that? And I don't know. I mean, I think this is more like every startup, right? Where it's I have this new way, I have this new idea, I have this new thing that is kind of weird and it's kind of different. And you're probably going to hate it at first, but I'm going to meet you halfway. I'm going to understand your ground, and I'm going to just help you toe into the water, right? So that's not panel related advice, but I would say that's the only way that you can do that is to go find the people who need it. You need to find the people, just like any other product market fit, you need to find the people who need your service. And it's not the danger is this end of the political spectrum needs it because they need to see the light, or this end needs it and they need to see the light. It's it's the ends that need it, and it's hard to address both at the same time.
Well, kind of like an AI perspective of it is that we've heard from some researchers that something that is useful is before they even start using the app, priming them with what are your favorite shows that you watch, or very human things where it's you prime it with either it might not even be as complicated as AI, but just an algorithm that just asks them questions and then matches them with people that maybe like Marvel but are on different sides and stuff.
So from that perspective, I think that one of the things that excites me the most is that last event was education, and I think that one of the skills that I think that we don't value too much right now in education in general is the ability to hold a dialogue, right? Being able to have a conversation with someone who has a different opinion than you, and how to be civil about it, regardless of what the topic is. I mean, outside of politics, it's just a useful human skill. And I think that that's one of the things that's going to become more important as computational power accelerates, right? Right now, quantum computing is just like in the air, but once we actually get it from like deceptive to disruptive, we're going to have to be, everything that's more human, that makes you more human, those are the skills that are going to be worth the most. And for this one, I think it's more the ability for dialogue, the one that I would pinpoint as. There was a question there, like, what skills should we be learning to be able to be prepared for this accelerating future? And that would be just like my short answer on that.
I think there's a bunch of questions. I want to address your first question, but will you say it again? Because I don't want to lose sight of the essence of it. Well, I know it was around, you're doing this town hall thing, you're trying to bring people together around local issues, or?
So we wanted originally to have it be political based because it's like the tribalism that we're seeing in the political climate, both, I mean, regardless of the side, I mean, you could have like issues with that, but just the moderate voter is becoming less and less, and in terms of like people reaching across the aisle and like being public about it and following through, that's also lessening. So just like not really looking to the politicians to fixing it, but the civilians, because like they ultimately answer to us. So if we become more moderate, then maybe in the future, and like how to do that, or if that, like you were saying, should even be an AI question or something like that.
Well, I mean, I think you talked a little bit about getting that advice and trying to do some sort of pre-assessment or some sort of analysis of what people are into and try to map them based on interests that maybe not political. It's like, hey, we both love comic books, but we hate each other politically. Yeah. But at least we can get together and start somewhere, right? Which I think is amazing, and I totally agree with your premise. But the challenge is going to be how do we collect data from these different people to know how to bring them together? And I think a really good solution to that is doing some sort of pre-assessment, the same way that I build, again, my Flipboard, is they ask me what are all the things I'm into, and then I start getting news based on what I'm into. So you're going to have to come up with some interesting ways that users want to participate in to collect information about them. Then you have the intelligence tools to start building your mapping structure and say, I want to bring these people together around this issue. And we know that they're polarized on this issue, but we also know based on the interactions that they will come together and galvanize on this issue. I mean, it sounds like an amazing thing. If you could pull it off, I applaud you, but there will need to be some sort of data collection element of it. You can use social media, you can do these pre-assessments, but there's a lot of people challenged with making any sort of recommendation on collecting the data, generally speaking. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to share some startup advice. It's not, everything pretty much has been covered. We do new hire surveys, and one of the questions we get from our clients is, well, how do we know that we're not getting negative employee feedback from people that are just unlucky? They're wired to be disengaged people. They're just kind of they're just going to bitch. I'll tell you what our clients actually say. Like some of our executives are like, how do I know this is an employee that's just the bitch factor? And so one of the things we're doing is like in the new hire, so we collect company-wide data, but we collect individual data. In the individual data that we collect in the new hire onboarding process, we're starting to build a psychometric profile of employees, and not in a weird Cambridge Analytica way, but in a hey, are you Stephen Huerta, a person? I am a bubbly, like I'm a high I on the disc profile. I like to talk a lot, obviously, and so what's the makeup of Stephen? What's the makeup of Mary? What's the makeup, and how likely is this person to be engaged or not? And I think that's exactly what was mentioned earlier, is getting that information up front. But I can share a lot of thought here.
Yeah, no, I'd love to reach out.
Great. Another one? You want to do it just voice or?
Or I could yell, I'm loud. So this is less of an AI question. I'm sure there's probably AI solution in the future down the road. but more of a technology question. As a technologist, I used to lead like a department of engineers and whatnot. As we have more remote teams, more remote workers, everybody wants to work remote, but problems y'all are solving are more increasingly complex. How do we effectively do that when people are connected via Slack and email and these things, but really increasingly more disconnected? You mentioned, cubicles are going away, offices are going away. How do you guys see the future of the workplace solving complex problems on teams when we're all in our own, spare bedrooms?
So I wish we had a perfect answer for you, but the reality is that the companies are struggling with it. I think there are some that are doing it better than others. The one case study I can give you, one of our advisors is a woman named Shelby Wolpa. She is a local people operations expert. She worked at Instacart. Now she works for Envision. And Envision have a fully remote workforce. And so I think they're really, and she does this, just speaking on the topic that you brought up. And what really it comes down to, is at the most basic level is, are you creating a culture that is really encouraging productivity, work, the things that you're trying to accomplish with your team, collaboration, transparency, all those various things. Are you really creating a culture that encourages that? And if you haven't kind of set out clear, rules of the road, if you haven't also set clear boundaries, because that's another thing, is we're increasingly distracted, the workforce is, and I don't see that getting better. I see that becoming more of a challenge. Attention management 101 is having boundaries, and the leader at the top really has to be the epitome of the culture that you're trying to set, and it has to be intentional. A lot of companies that we work with, they don't actually want to change, they just want it to happen, and the reality is that's that's insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, it's just not going to happen. And so that's kind of, sorry I can't give you a more tactical answer, but there are case studies out there of world-class businesses that are doing this really, really well.
Curious to see what you guys think.
Oh, yeah. I actually think this might be one of the first killer apps for AR. The idea that you could be feeling like you're sitting next to somebody. Because there's so much gained from proximity, and I know in my job, just as a leader of a team, I stop more bad things from happening just because I overhear something and I'm like, wait, hold on now, what's happening now? What are we saying? And that's a crappy way to think about it, but sometimes your job is to stop people from wasting their time on something that they don't need to do, right? And when you're in a hole, I worked, before Faber, I worked at Evernote. And Evernote's the Redwood City-based company. I was running the Austin office. And we were always working with the Redwood City teams. And we kept FaceTime chats just open all the time with everybody, just so you got that weird, so-and-so's at their desk, and so I'm going to just ask them this quick question, But everybody ended up going on mute because you could hear everybody's dogs barking, and then it just didn't work as well as we hoped it would. But it was close, right? It was pretty close. But I do think that is probably, there's another leap forward in technology that makes you feel that proximity before it works. Because now it's broken. It's just totally broken. Yeah,
can I just add a few things?
Oh, yeah.
So there's 3 things that I can share with you. The first one is, there's an example you can look up. It's called eXp Realty. So this is a brokerage company that they don't have a physical office. And they built basically a virtual campus. Or literally if you're logged in, you can be working on your computer or something else, but you're open all the time, and you can actually choose quiet zone, I want to have, because what they were trying to address was having those water cooler conversations. Because a meeting, it's orchestrated, it interrupts you. Meetings just suck in general. And the second one that I want to share with you is One of the things that I'm working on particularly is, I can't say the name yet, but one of the projects is trying to prototype those spaces. And especially thinking about how you're not going to be working for the same company all the time. Like, you don't work just for one company, but you're going to be able to just freely jump between functions and roles and companies and what you're actually doing. So we're trying to figure out how you can build that ecosystem where I think it was Steve that talked about a human connection. So how can you have that human connection and not expect it to come from your coworkers or even just from your the place where you work at? So just think about those two things. There are companies that already have that, and I think VR and AR both have huge applications, but once again, technology alone won't solve it, and I think the human connection part is the most important part about that. I think him and then we had you.
Okay, so I'm in e-commerce, right? So we've, over the years, we've had to develop softwares to implement to solve problems, right? So what I'm curious about is, especially after reading Ray Kurzweil's book, Physics of the Future, and knowing about the singularity and everything like that, and learning capabilities of AI, where do you guys see that learning capability, that curve going up more? Because I've been seeing in the past couple of years where problems that we had just a year ago, all of a sudden there's multiple platforms that are dealing with those problems. So what have you all seen in your businesses where AI has been able to actually learn or maybe even foresee possible problems that are happening and then solve them? So I'm curious because that's what's going to help solve problems for my business.
Speak from the least advanced version of this. We use machine learning for three things. One is for fraud detection. So we've seen like leaps forward in fraud detection when we pass every order through machine learning algorithm that says, is this fraud or not? The second is forecasting the future. So seasonal elements that are really hard to predict, you just feed in a bunch of data and the machines know the future better than you do. And then the third that we've started to work on is like sentiment analysis and natural language processing. And we're just starting to see the benefits of that. Was this good or was it bad? When you've got tens of thousands of conversations going on at any given moment, it's hard to keep track. But those are the areas where we've seen leaps forward that we couldn't have expected, say the data started at that company, which was like 3 years ago.
Yeah, I have two examples on what we've seen through the AI and machine learning that we have. And so first is for companies that are 250 to 1,000 employees, or smaller size customers. We know that particularly if you do not have an active employee engagement measurement program, so like engagement surveys, that sort of thing. We know we can predict the curve of indicators that how they're going to score. Like generally, there's a repeated curve that we see with our customers, and we know that typically communication is the first issue we identify. We know when we dig deeper that communication problem is really a collaboration issue, and we know, and I mentioned this earlier, like collaboration and management, that's what's trending now. And so the way that we found that is through looking at the data, looking across our clients' data. The other thing that we've learned is we know based on after a merger or acquisition. So a lot of our clients get acquired. We have a lot of private equity backed customers, and we know based on an ENPS. So we will do like a full engagement analysis, and we know based on an ENPS check-in, 3 months later, what directionally where the business is headed from an attrition perspective. And just because we know there are two typical curves, and we know that based on the ENPS check-in, we're now predicting, okay, if you don't course correct, your engagement is going to plummet, and a quarter later, you're going to see attrition in these specific groups. And so that's how we're starting to apply machine learning, and looking at the data that we
Yeah, so I think for us, the stuff that's most exciting and new and up and coming is a lot of the stuff that's going on with deep learning. So specifically things like natural language processing and computer vision. A lot of interesting things going on using adversarial neural nets. So how do we put two machine learning models and pit them against one another to increase the learning of the actual model itself? So one weird example, and some people might have to help me with the details, but a programmer created an adversarial neural net to build its own video game. So let's write an algorithm, so to speak, and allow it to create a video game. And basically the developer wanted to play the video game, right? AI makes the video game, I'm gonna play the video game, it's gonna be this really cool thing. And what happened is the AI started cheating in its own video game. So now, all of a sudden, it created an interesting, fair game. It kind of was like a Galactica type of like space destroyer type of video game, you know, Atari style, and started cheating at the game. It made it impossible for the human to win the game. And when the human stopped wanting to play, the bot is trained to, no, I need humans to play, that's why I'm here. So it started to post on social media baiting people to come in and play the game only to destroy them immediately once they enter the game. So you'll see if you Google birth of Skynet ? The first thing that'll hit you in news is this adversarial neural net. So there's a lot going on with deep learning, and some other cool things that are less creepy is using computer vision. I think computer vision is really cool to create data. This entire room is creating data right now, but we're not capturing any of it. But computer vision can turn our eyes into raw data, and we can use that data to understand this room and how to give a better presentation the next time we're in the room together. And you can apply that anywhere. Another really cool thing, and this is more, I'm going to go on like the really creepy, like scary part to the really like optimistic, amazing part, is that there's a lot in privacy, a lot going on in the advent of how do we leverage and keep data private. Leverage private data and keep data private. And there's things like federated learning where you can actually process your data on your cell phone, for example, and keep it local to your device, but the insights are pushed to a cloud and mixed with the insights of all of your phone data, and we never know what you did or you did or you did, but we know what the collective everyone can do, and we can learn from that. Other techniques like differential privacy, where you can basically randomize corrupted data set. So if you have protected data, we can randomly corrupt that data and then learn from the corrupted data, so there's no way to do data interrogation and reverse engineer what you did or you did or you did. So I think the privacy space is really exciting because we'll get better intelligence because we can use more data and we have less privacy concerns.
I want to add in something. You said you're in e-commerce, right? So one of the things that I'm working on, and I've seen a lot that most entrepreneurs don't see, is the concept of ownership is going to change a lot. You don't want to own everything, you just want to use it. And I've seen very few companies trying to address that, and most e-commerce companies are designed to, I'll buy it, I'll ship it to you, I'll give it to you, not necessarily figuring out the logistics, how do I get it back, but primarily the industry I'm working on in real estate, it's how do you create spaces that are more flexible? How do you design a product that is going to be ready in 3 to 5 years when, if this thing is changing that fast, like in 3 to 5 years, maybe no one wants an office space. So try to think about what is changing in the way, whatever product you're selling, or what is changing in the way that people see it, people use it, the way they relate to it, and you'll start to see certain pathways and trends that you need to design things for where the puck is going to be when you finish it. So just keep that in mind for everyone. I guess that's a good advice for everyone, right? Like, what is changing about our relationship with ABC, and what am I going to do about it?
So I'm Matt Jordan, I'm founder of Ross Agriculture. I actually do work in agriculture.
Thank you for feeding us.
So the American ag story is a success story that's unlike anywhere in the U.S., anywhere in the world. But if you take a look at countries like Nicaragua, where they still have 2/3 of the population that's involved in agriculture, and agriculture is really an analog world out there. just showed an example of a program being written by a computer. We're going to have human level AI in 12 years now. What do we teach them? And what do they learn? Do we teach them programming, artificial intelligence, machine learning?
That's looking at me like you want to answer?
Yes, yes, yes. No, especially, so again, the challenge today with AI is wealth and access to the fundamentals to allow us to achieve this kind of augmented state, right? I think getting the world connected for free is probably a really important thing, because without the internet, none of this is possible. So I think, again, there's probably some, systemic issues that we have to solve first. Data literacy. I think everyone should have a certain level of data literacy and understand the importance of data, how to collect data, how to leverage data is fundamental to this new world, especially for those that are a little behind. And then I think computer languages should be mandated like foreign languages. Being able to communicate to a computer moving forward will be equally, if not greater, of importance than trying to communicate, leveraging different languages as we all start to kind of homogenize and speak the same language. It's really important for us to have the same literacy when it comes to computer languages. So I think just generally speaking, I think if we can make baby steps, and that's all you and I can do, right, is make small steps, is really focus on access to the data, or access to internet technology, data literacy, and then computer language.
I mean, I'll give my 2 cents on this. And I agree with you. I think that one of the big things is, aside from data literacy, it's also adaptability. So it's not about choosing what right now, because if not, when that thing changes, then, okay, we're back to the same problem, right? What do I teach you now that these things are able to be done? Like, I think that programming, I agree with you that people should learn how to program, but not because being able to communicate with a computer, but being able to understand how they think and how you can put it, right? I was talking with some people the other day around, like, Baidu has this real-time translation, and it's spotless. Obviously, they optimize right now more for Chinese to English, but they're already working on other ones. But if you start cracking that, right, but that's just the act of communicating, right? There are a lot of nuances and a lot of cultural understanding that comes along with language. So on my way, it's how do you get this new way of thinking, and how do you, that's why we saw with Olga when we were talking about the events. The previous one was education. Education and work are inherently related, right? The way we learn, the way we see knowledge, and the way we add value is going to keep changing. And how do you nourish that ability to learn how to learn and unlearn, which I think is even harder, right? How do you recognize those biases and okay, I need to get rid of this, I don't need to think about it this way. Being from Guatemala, I've seen, right now working with a couple of companies that they're basically having drones survey moisture levels. That's what I was talking about, like just the convergence, like how cheap sensors are. Literally, we're working with like Arduinos and like a makeshift Wi-Fi network, some over Bluetooth because terrain. But still, the main thing that I love what Steve was saying, right? What they need to learn is, how do I clean up this data? What do I do with this now? Because collecting and giving them open source like drones, sensors, this irrigation setup, that's just a start, right? Why should I be doing it? What do I do with all this information that I'm gathering? I think in that adaptability, when the environment changes, how do I spot it? And I anticipate to these changes so I can capture that value from being able to spot that trend.
All right, everybody, I think we
Yeah. They're going to kick us out now, but we're definitely going to be doing more events around the topic. So I was just going to ask you 2 things. One, we're going to send a survey out, so please reply. If you want to see any of these guys, including myself, back here, we're going to try to do events more frequently next year. Thank you all of us for coming, Google for hosting us. And I don't know if anyone else wants to add something from you guys, just parting words before they turn off the lights.
I was going to say something about turning off the lights. We actually
our security is up for this hour. So if you guys want to continue discussion, you have to ask me to go downstairs to the lobby for dinner. Or go to a bar, the politique, or the Italian place that are both really good and open late. Thank you so much, everyone.
Parting words or anything? Or just
Thank you to Pedro. Thank you for such a great turnout for such an amazing intellectual exercise. So I love to see that people are interested in this stuff. But we'll be around. So if you have questions, let us know.